Welcome to the Binmin podcast. We know that the Christian life can be hard to figure out, but we also believe that everyone should know the next step for making their spiritual life more important to them. I'm Pops.
I'm Dave.
I'm JJ.
And I'm Bob.
Today's episode is entitled Finding a Spiritual Mentor.
Yes, which is not only important, but I think it's ironic that probably like 3/4 of those of us on this episode have even been particularly mentored by 1/4 of this team.
You're welcome, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, thank you. Should we just take the rest of the episode for us? We'd appreciate it.
I learned everything I need.
Well, you know what? I'm so glad you brought that up. So, Dave, why do I even need a spiritual mentor?
Honestly, I don't know anymore. I'm so humbled. Yeah, I think there's a pretty good and clear reason. It is a really great catalyst for your spiritual life. And by that I mean, if you don't have one, you're sort of stuck operating through your own context and life spiritually, not alone, because you may have a support network and whatnot, but not with somebody who can sort of like bring you along or coach you up, level you up, offer you guidance, be a guiding North Star in how things can be done practically. And as we've covered in different episodes, right, you're seeking out somebody who is a little bit further along the road than you. That doesn't necessarily mean they're older, doesn't necessarily mean that they're taller, doesn't necessarily mean they're stronger, though those would be, great. Yeah, it just is what it is. So you're looking for somebody who, is at least more mature in these certain areas. So you're looking for this spiritual Yoda, somebody who can, be a role in your life that helps, again, catalyze this development, this evolution of yourself spiritually by doing what? By helping you interpret how God is operating in this season of your life and for you to come into alignment with that, into what He is calling you to be and to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Pops,
Uh-oh.
What is a spiritual mentor?
Well, Dave actually covered it really well. I think a spiritual mentor should be somebody that, as a disciple, you trust. A mentor or discipler should be somebody who pours into your life, who exemplifies, however imperfectly, what it is to be a follower of Jesus, who's there to ask you the hard questions, who's there to answer questions for you, and very importantly, is there to walk with you during some of the challenging times that you're going to face. Now, I have to tell you, because I'm just old, I'm several decades older than all the men that I disciple. But it doesn't always have to work that way. In fact, a discipler could even be somebody younger than you, if they are more spiritually mature. The other thing that you can find is that the discipler or spiritual mentor doesn't necessarily have to be further along in all areas of the Christian walk than you are. In fact, some people may look for a spiritual mentor in particular areas: Bible knowledge, apologetics, evangelism, soul care. Those can be marvelous mentors for you during your time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. So, but what if I feel intimidated about asking someone to be my mentor? I'm just kind of freaked out.
Yeah, of course. Finding a spiritual mentor can be incredibly intimidating. You are being vulnerable. You're saying, I don't have it all together. Yep. You are really determining, hey, is this person going to be a fit for me? Am I going to be a fit for them? And truthfully, you are giving this person some level of power to speak into your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you feel a little intimidated, that's perfectly okay. But ask the Lord to turn that intimidation into humility and gratitude. Humility, why? Well, the more that you listen, the more that you learn, the more that you change, that's when you really start to look like Jesus and see God at work in your life. And with gratitude, you want to pray that you have gratitude so that God would even put, more people or put those mature people in your life who'd be willing to support you, and having a grateful heart for when He does that as you ask. I mean, having that position of gratitude is incredibly important. And this is not a one-way relationship.
Good point.
This is going to be a blessing to them as well. As you ask them questions, you engage them, you help them to walk through this life as well. And that, I assure you, will be encouraging to them as well.
Yeah, like you think about how you would feel right now if I just came up to you.
Yeah.
Was like, hey, can we talk? And then I made that ask you, you'd be like, whoa, like you feel honored.
Absolutely.
It feels, but it also feels right
Sure.
that you're answering a call the Lord's given you then to be a leader to a young person.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I love that
Exactly.
reciprocity idea.
Yeah. So, Bob, we live in a digital age. Is it possible for me to have a spiritual mentor in this digital milieu that we live in right now?
Yeah,
What
first-
even are people?
What even is a milieu? I think is the better question. Chances are you are not like this episode was not handed to you on a giant stone tablet, right? And you're not in the room here with us. So like, man, online resources are so beneficial, right? They're so helpful, like podcasts and sermons and articles and social media and videos, like all that's helpful. I think I just like that's why Binmin literally exists, right? Because we want this in our lives. But the thing that those spiritual mentors can't do for you is it's one-way communication. So I'm hearing someone or watching someone or reading someone, it's only coming at me. Like that resource can't actually know what's going on in my life. Yeah. It can't actually respond to the questions that I have.
Intrinsically one way.
Right, it's just one way. So I think like because that can't happen, it is so good to have a real life interactive mentor. Like that's the idea that like, let me supplement my spiritual growth with online resources for sure, but it shouldn't be a replacement for genuine relationships.
Well said. Well said. Dave, go ahead and break it down for us. How do I go about discovering or finding or asking someone to be a spiritual mentor for me?
So in the episode preceding this one, we listed or at least identified the 4 key areas that you could find somebody to play this role. So you could look in your church, which seems like a pretty good and logical location, which if you haven't listened to our episodes on why you need to be a part of the church, maybe go there next. Number 2, you could look in your own family, as Bob alluded. I mean, I've treated Pops as a personal mentor, a professional mentor, a spiritual mentor. You've worn a lot of hats, even soccer coach when I was in junior high. Having never played soccer in his life, he was the best dang soccer coach I probably ever had in playing for 12 years.
Wow.
Number 3, in your network. Again, we've alluded, but it could be somebody you know from the gym or the coffee shop or work or wherever. But you have the community that you have intentionally, and if you're wondering what your network is, you don't need to stress about scrubbing LinkedIn for a godly person who's more successful than you. Just look left or right in your network, and you'll find somebody potentially. And then 4th, in counseling. So you have these opportunities, multiple channels, and you can also, we would suggest, leverage your friends and your peers to suggest maybe who they'd recommend. More than likely, you know somebody who has been mentored or discipled. So if I were to turn to Bob and say, hey, hadn't you been mentored by Pastor such and so at your church? And Bob says, yeah. And then I say, well, do you think you'd be interested in grabbing coffee? Bob would likely say, yeah. And I could ask him to, intro me to Pastor such and so.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then now you have an opportunity for a conversation. So that would drive on my last point. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, what you're saying is so important. The one thing that I want to ask you is, when you're looking for a spiritual mentor, are you looking for somebody long-term each and every time?
Could you be looking for something long-term? Absolutely. But does it necessarily have to be that? No. Okay. I think with the intent always being short-term in scope, I think that helps both of you. Great. For one main reason. I remember distinctly when I was a younger person seeking out a mentor, asking this person to be a mentor, and about maybe by the 3rd lunch, I realized I have next to nothing in common with this person. We do not communicate well. I was sort of begrudging the time that was spent. It was this is just not a congruent fit. It just didn't feel right. But I'd already asked, can we do this for a year? So there was that.
And we got through
and I
it.
learned a lot. Yeah. Sorry, Mom, wherever you went. No. So start short-term in scope. It could be a coffee. And again, if you're being hyper-focused with the thing you want mentored on or coached on, that might only be 2 coffees or 3 coffees.
Right.
But the reality is...
How do I pray?
Yeah. And it might be an elder or leader at your church or in your network or whatever, but not all people are identical and the same, thus not all mentors and disciples will be. Mm-hmm. So some will be more committed and intentional than others. So just keep that in mind. Start short term, keep asking questions, and it'll play out the way it's meant to play out.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so break it down. How do I actually do a meeting with a spiritual mentor?
Yeah, having a meeting with a spiritual mentor, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It truly doesn't have to be complicated. However, the number one thing that you want to bring to the table is questions. You really want to be curious. You don't have to have everything figured out ahead of time. I mean, that's the point, right? But it's a very good idea to have some questions ready. And throughout your time together, stay curious. Ask questions. If you don't feel like you ask good questions, just remember things like who and what and when and where and why and how. I know for myself personally, when I had the absolute blessing and privilege to be discipled by Pops himself. He was an absolute champion at asking questions. And what that did was it allowed me to open up within my own worldview, what's going on in my mind and my heart. When I had so much going on, I couldn't even get it out. But he probed with those just wonderful questions, and that allowed him to use the wisdom God has given him to answer what really is the question. And he answered me, the questioner.
Thank you. Thanks, Joseph.
You got a lot of street cred, Dad. How would you break it down?
Well, I will tell you that in my experience, in general, there are two types of meetings that you'll have with your disciple. The one is the short, organic, the disciple comes to you and just says, look, I have a question, I have an issue, there's a topic I'd like to study, and those are just dealt with at the time. Now, the other is a more formal, agenda-driven spiritual mentoring meeting, and those can be definitely long-term. They are based on questions. In my case, the way I've discipled young men in the past has been for a year with assignment, expectation that that'll be done. And I must tell you, during those times, I grow more than any man I've ever discipled. It's just the greatest joy in the world. The only other thing that I would add when it comes to having a successful meeting is to make sure that all of this is bathed in prayer. You pray before, you pray during, and you pray after. And Joseph touched on it, but it's just worth repeating. If you really want a spiritual mentor, you need to commit yourself to being open, honest, and transparent.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, I cannot do anything with someone I'm discipling if they're just holding back and are unwilling or don't trust me. That's the best way to really develop a close relationship.
I remember you telling me one time, this might have been when I was in grad school or something, that mentorship is like someone coming to the doctor's office. And it's like if you come to Pops as a physician and go, yeah, I'm good. And you're like, clearly you're not good. There's something going on. And like, where does it hurt? I don't know. I guess I'm saying. And they pull up their sleeve and it's like all the skin's melted off. And you're like, oh, wow, yeah, let's have a conversation. Let's start talking about a response to this or preparation to solve it or whatever. So I think, it can be hard. And I'll just say anecdotally, it is very hard for me to let my guard down. But I also think, to what you said earlier, when you build this relationship with somebody you can trust and who clearly shows you that love, as we've talked about, speaking truth in grace and love, it helps those walls come down. And then whether it's short-term or long-term, being transparent can earn you a lot of that capital in the relationship to make great headway.
Well, I have to tell you, this has been a great episode, and my love cup is full. So I hate to.
It's a shame that this episode will never air.
So let's go ahead. Bob, can you give us a call to action? What's our next step?
What's your next step? Find a mentor. No surprise, that is the next step for this week or this month, the next few weeks. Reach out to a mentor. This week, just find someone who's a little bit or maybe a lot further along in their spiritual life and initiate a conversation. Just don't let it be overcomplicated. This could be chatting a little bit more with that older gal or that older guy who sits nearby you at church, kind of after the service. This could be sending an email out to somebody that you're aware of or a friend said, hey, Brittany, talk to this gal. She's really awesome at our church. She's kind of in her 60s. Send her an email. Great, send that email. Whatever you do, and maybe just buy them coffee, right? It'll cost you $6 or whatever it is, but it'll be worth the conversation and you can take care of them. But start by picking out just one area of your life to talk about. You don't have to open up everything, especially in one conversation. And if you can't think of an area of your life, hey, help me pray, or what should I read in my Bible, or help me with dating. If you can't think of an area right now, just ask them this question. I'm looking to find some next steps in how to grow in my spiritual life. Could you help me figure out what those next steps should be? And then they can help ask you some questions as well. Let us know what you talked about in that coffee date or that email or that engagement, because we would love to hear more from you, whether it's on comments here or whether it's on our socials. It is so fun to be able to hear what's going on in your life.
Thank you, guys. Oh, incidentally, I love all three of you. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Binmin podcast. We know that the Christian life can be hard to figure out, but we also believe everyone should know the next step for making their spiritual life more important to them. Binmin is a resource ministry dedicated to helping you discover those next steps.
That is right. So in order to find the show notes, as well as a bunch of other great resources, blogs, podcasts, videos, where can they head?
Binmin.org.
Boom. Make your way there and you will find all the goodies. And also, if you want the most well-constructed, beautifully written, may I say it, most professional
Exhilarating.
newsletter you've ever experienced in your life, what should they sign up for?
The newsletter.
Oh, Binmin newsletter. That's the jam. So we thank you for your time today. Please make sure to like and subscribe and do all the things YouTube demands in order for us to even be discoverable in this day and age with the algorithm. And we thank you for the time you've spent already for this episode. We'll see you in the next one. God bless.